things that helped me cope best to get through this were I had 2 or 3 very, very good friends who were absolutely brilliant, would text me or ring me every day to make sure I was okay, totally unjudgmental.
I think I was really fortunate that I had lots of friends and family that were incredibly supportive.
I grew closer to my family as well. They were fantastic. I don't think they really knew how to deal with it, but they were just there, and that's what I needed, somebody on the phone.
For me, the hardest thing was trying to create a stable home environment for my children.
If I hadn't had children, I could have probably walked away a lot easier. But having a son who was only 4 at the time, I felt immense duty and love as a father to be involved in his life, and I wanted to be involved. And at the time, with the emotions running high, the ex was keen for me not to have so much involvement as I do now.
The lowest point for me was always when the children went away. So if they were even having supper with their father or going away for the weekend for him, it just kicked into all the abandonment for me, all the rejection, all the being alone.
Being a father now, we have sort of effectively shared responsibility. I see my son on a very regular basis. We have a great relationship, which I'm very pleased with. In a way, if we hadn't got divorced, I wonder what sort of relationship we would have, whether it would be this close.
I know that when I forgave him and myself for what happened to our marriage, that was the beginning of the real healing for us as a family.
There is light at the end of the tunnel, and there's hope, and life will get better, although you hate it when people tell you that.
The breakdown of our relationship not only affects our relationship with our ex, but it affects all our other relationships. It will affect our friendships. It will affect our family relationships. It may affect your working colleagues and the way you work, and it will affect your relationship with your children, if you have them. So in this session, we're going to be talking about how we manage those other relationships. Firstly, we're going to be talking about friendships. Every friendship that you have will, in some way or another, be affected by your relationship breakdown. Some friendships will grow much closer. Other friendships will become a little bit more awkward. And then sadly, some friendships will drop away and disappear completely. This change in our friendships can be really, really hard to cope with. It can be frustrating and difficult to comprehend. However, the most important thing to understand is that it's very normal. It happens to us all. It can be very difficult, but there is a cycle of friendships that is involved in going through separation and divorce. Hopefully, for some of you, you will find that some of those friends do become much closer. They're people that you can begin to really rely on. And hopefully for all of us, we begin to get what I call trusted friends. They're people that you can be really open with. You can talk to a lot more. You can tell them what you're really thinking. You can tell them all your thoughts and not be frightened by their reaction. They are people that you will respect their point of view. They're people whose opinion you might seek out. They are really important people to try and nurture and encourage in your life. Many of our friendships will change, though. And although it's perfectly possible to have mutual friends with your ex, it's really important that we think through the boundaries that we have with these mutual friends, where friends overlap. For instance, it's probably useful for you to think through, if you've got a Facebook website, think through your Facebook settings. How much access will you allow for your ex and your ex's friends to your Facebook site? And similarly, how much access do you have to your ex and your ex's friends' sites? What we suggest is that it's actually quite a good idea to refrain from trying to find out more information about your ex during this time. Particularly, try not to talk to your friends and get information out of your friends. It's actually quite a difficult situation for your friends to be in. How much can they say? They don't want to give away confidence of their friend, but also they want to be a friend to you. So it's quite a difficult position for them to be in. More importantly, though, actually, it's generally pretty unhelpful, the information that you might gather of what's happening to your ex. As your friends change, so will your social life change. You may find that your single life starts to change the invitations that you get. The invites to the social evenings or the invites to the parties, whatever it may be. And again, that changing social life is incredibly difficult to cope with and comprehend. The really important thing to remember is that it's nothing to do with you as a person. It's everything to do with the changing situation you're in. Because ultimately, some of our friends may cause us deep hurt by not getting in contact with us, not ringing you up to see how you are, and actually may slip away completely. That's really difficult to cope with, and we may need to let them go. We may need to forgive them and let go of that situation. What we need to remember is that we can't change someone else's actions, but we can look at our own reactions and see how we deal with that. It actually does become a good moment in your life to see what you want to do yourself. Not what you used to do as a couple, now what you want to do and how you want your social life to be like in the future. One person who found that Saturdays were quite difficult for her, that she found that they were quite long and very lonely. What she did was to sign up with a walking club. And she went out early in the morning on a Saturday and would walk most of the day and come back home at 7 o'clock in the evening. And then when she found that she'd come home, she'd have a bath, have some food, and then that was really it for her. She wanted to go to sleep by that stage. However, importantly, she'd met some new people, and that had started to build her self-confidence. This could be a moment where you start doing something that you'd always wanted to do. This is a moment where you can create space to do something for you. It may be really hard for you to comprehend that, and you may have no extra energy to do that. But even starting something small can be significant for you. And if you do start something, then I'd encourage you to do it as a group. Don't do it by yourself. If it's cooking that you like, don't just cook for you and a friend. Cook for 10 people. Cook for a charity. Cook for the school. If it's drawing you like, then join an art club. If it's running that you like, join the running association. What that does is to maybe get you out of your normal habits. Get to meet new people. And most importantly, you'll find that in meeting new people, you start to gain your confidence. And gaining confidence in this moment is a crucial step for being able to move on successfully. The second thing is our working lives, our relationships at work may change. Often we find that temporarily at the beginning of a separation, our minds are sort of distracted. Or maybe that you've got a legal process, a complicated legal discussion going on about your finances. And your mind is taken up with all that stuff that's going on. I certainly found out that in the early days of my separation and divorce, I was pretty ineffectual at work. If that's similar to your situation, I would encourage you to maybe say something to your boss. Most people are really kind and considerate when they understand the issues that you're going through. And it may be helpful just to flag it up with them, just to help you. Of course, relationship breakdown brings a lot of chaos and change into our lives. And maybe your workplace is the only place that isn't changing. And if that's so, I'd encourage you to keep it as much as a little island amidst the chaos that's going on. Maybe you say to your ex, and maybe even to your friends, to say, look, please don't bring me at work to talk through any issue. Let's do it outside work. Try and keep work as an isolated area where you can hide away from it all. The breakdown of our relationship will also affect our relationships with our parents and our brothers and sisters, our siblings. It's actually important for us to realize that our parents and brothers and sisters may be going through similar emotions as we did initially in our separation. All those feelings that we talked about, our anger, our bitterness, our frustration, our feelings of sort of revenge, all that stuff may be going through your parents or your brothers and sisters. They may be feeling very protective of you and may really want to help you really express those things, and they may help you do that very vocally. As much as you can, I would urge you not to encourage them too much to over-egg on their feelings. Maybe enable them to have a different let-out for their emotions. What it will do is, if they are feeling much more bitter, it'll actually restrict you from moving on. If they're trying to vocalize their frustrations about something, it doesn't help you move on and deal with your issues as much. And if you have children, then actually it's quite important for them to be careful about what they say in and around your family. If you have children, you may have the relationships with your in-laws, your ex's parents. If you don't have those relationships, it may be completely appropriate just to let those relationships fizzle out. Normally, that's what they will do. However, of course, if you do have kids, then those in-laws are your children's grandparents. And as much as you can, to aim to have a working relationship with them in respect of the children is the best aim to have. One way of managing that is, as I say, to have a working relationship and just to keep your conversation with them just to the children. One woman who helped out on the course said this: I never spoke to my in-laws about my ex, about their son. I only talked about our children. After 7 years of hard battling, my mother-in-law now rings me and invites my children to see her on a more regular basis. You have to choose to keep strife out of your relationship with your in-laws, and not talking to them about my ex really helped. It may be really hard, especially at the beginning, but as much as you can, to keep that door, that relationship open with your in-laws will help you in the future. Hopefully, once the initial stress of the breakdown has passed, your children will be able to benefit from having grandparents. And that can be a very, really helpful relationship for your children.
Hello, I'm Kathy. We're going to spend the rest of this evening looking at the ways in which divorce affects our children and how we can best manage as parents. One of the hardest things about divorce is the possibility that we will be separated from our children. Some of you may not be living with your children on a regular basis, which can be deeply, deeply painful. This is what one dad wrote. The breakup of our marriage and all the aspirations I held for our future life together was like a bereavement. So was the realization that I was never going to live in the same house as my children again. I had to give myself time, space, and permission to cry. I wept from my gut for about 20 minutes every day for 6 months. Thereafter, it reduced, but it continued for about 18 months. I found that letting out the pain made me feel better, and I'm sure it helped the healing process. We may no longer live with our children permanently, or we may be separated from them for shorter periods. Whatever the situation, it can be intensely difficult. It hurts when we are separated from our children. It is important to acknowledge that and to grieve the loss. The loss is huge and nothing can fill that hole. We suggest you review the tips and tools that we discussed in session 1 to help you through this pain and loss. I would encourage you to find a number of different outlets for these feelings and proactive ways to manage them, because it is important for you and your children that you find a way to function, because they need you more than ever. And my story was that my children, when we separated, were just 11 months and 2 years old. And I became their full-time carer. The initial weeks and months of intense feelings of anger, betrayal, jealousy, and deep hurt were almost indescribable to the outside world. I'd go to church, I'd put a brave face on, and then I'd go home and I'd lose my temper with the children and cry. I became very isolated, just trying to survive. I wasn't really living. It was a very difficult time trying to cope with my emotions, while also trying to care for my children. At the time, I honestly felt like my husband had ruined my life, that he had rode off into the sunset to live happily ever after, and I was left to bring up the children alone. You know, I was so worried about their future and growing up in a home with one parent. And I'd torture myself by Googling the statistics on children from one parent families and crying all the time about it. It was intensely difficult. And, you know, no one gets parenting perfect. Divorced or married, there are stages in a child's development where children feel that everything a parent does is wrong. I now have 2 preteens, and I can definitely testify to that. So it really is important to not blame yourself, you know, for all the issues that your preteen or teenager has. You know, but obviously at the same time, it is important that we acknowledge our choices and actions can seriously hurt our children. You know, for me, one of the most agonising and therefore volatile times were when the children would be collected by their father. You know, I'd frequently argue with him in front of them, and it didn't help the children at all. You know, that wasn't the time to discuss difficult subjects with him. And, you know, I'd try and call them all the time when they were with their dad. And I'd get upset if he wanted to see them on what I considered my weekend. You know, and I resented losing time with them when it wasn't my fault that the marriage had ended. You know, and the children would get back from their dads and I'd give them the Spanish Inquisition. You know, it was damaging for them. They felt caught in the middle. You know, they didn't want to upset me. You know, I'd criticise their dad in front of them. You know, choices he'd made. I'd then send him long text messages on whatever they'd told me. You know, I even used to send messages through the children to their dad, you know, instead of talking to him directly. It wasn't fair on the children. I realised I had to change. I had to learn to co-parent as well. You know, and this also helped my recovery because there was less conflict and tension in my life. You know, they are older now, but the most volatile time is still when their dad collects them, they're much more likely to act up that morning. So I try and make sure their bags are packed in plenty of time, make sure they know when he's coming. I try and help them to look forward to their time with their dad. And at collection, I'll be friendly, I'll invite him in for a coffee. You know, all of that wasn't possible in the early days. But over time and with hard work, our relationship has improved so much. And that's really helped our children. You know, when they come back from their dads now, you know, I don't ask them what they've been up to. Obviously, if they want to tell me in their own time, they're very welcome to. But no matter what is said, I keep a straight face now. I don't overreact, don't say anything. I just, you know, smile and nod, say, oh, that sounds nice. I want it to be a safe space for them to feel they can share their good times with their dad, as well as any bad times, but without judgment, without them feeling caught in the middle, without them feeling like they're trying to keep both of us happy. And what was really important to me in the early days was when they went to their dads, that I had something good, something nice to look forward to, and that the children knew that. You know, it would help my children to know that I'd be okay, and it would help me to be okay. You know, have a friend with you in the early days if you can. Whenever they go to their dads, plan something nice. You know, nowadays I'm so used to it. I actually look forward to my time alone. But I couldn't have imagined feeling that way in the beginning. You know, the kids do find it hard that the rules are different in both houses. But now I just simply say, in our house, we do this. No blame is directed at their dad. In fact, my daughter has told me before that I need to stop defending him. That's how far I've now come. But, you know, it's so important that my own feelings do not affect their relationship with him. You know, and obviously the older they are, the more information they are going to need to process your separation and divorce, but you still obviously have to be careful what you say. You know, they are half him and they are half you. Adult children can react obviously very differently. And we're obviously all at different ages and stages in our lives, but we're all struggling to cope with the loss of our dreams. You know, if you're older, you may have been looking forward to co-parenting as grandparents together and having the children over to look after them together as grandparents. You know, and you've got to learn how to facilitate and co-parent as grandparents moving forward. You know, whatever your stage, there are so many things you need to process. And research has shown that divorce significantly increases the risk to children of having major life challenges, such as mental illness, physical health, and difficulties in other relationships. However, research has also shown that a good working relationship between both parents can substantially reduce this impact and create a successful environment for children to thrive. So that there really is hope for you and your children. How you and your ex manage your situation can have a huge impact on the effect your divorce has on them. As we said before, the choices you make now will determine the speed and extent of your recovery, and also your children's. Our aim in this session is to give you some tools to help you manage the situation, and in particular, improve your parenting relationship with your ex. You know, to start with, it is vital that we understand which actions will help our children and which can harm them. I am going to show you a short video now to illustrate this by the charity Vegans. The quotes used here are genuine quotes from children that we have supported.
Dad was awful to Mum, but he's still my dad. And I love him even if Mum doesn't. The worst thing was not being able to please them both. I hate it when they make me choose. I feel happier now they're talking to each other again.
Seeing my parents ignoring each other makes me feel alone. It makes me feel unwanted and upset. But seeing them together supporting me, even though I know it's hard for them, means everything to me.
I hate seeing how Mum and Dad don't like each other and just can't be normal with each other. It's so embarrassing having to go through parents' evening twice. It's so much easier now they're coming together and getting along.
We see that there is a real difference in the child depending on how the parents relate to each other in that video. Whatever our current relationship with our ex, good or bad, we all need to improve for the benefit of our children. So what things significantly affect a child's development during divorce? Research highlights these 5 issues. 1. It is very normal for children within the same family to respond very differently depending on their age and personality. 2. A parent's well-being is important. If you and your ex are coping and okay, this will directly help your children. 3. Children need quality time with both parents. This has nothing to do with a language of custody or percentages of time, but it's all about building good quality time with mum and dad for the child's benefit. 4, children flourish when there is good communication across their families, both between their parents and with them. And 5, conflict between parents is harmful to our children, especially if they witness this conflict. This can be active or passive. Active conflict, rhino behaviour includes shouting and slamming doors. Passive conflict or hedgehog behaviour is things like no eye contact, the silent treatment, or completely ignoring the other person. Both are detrimental to children. So how do we overcome these? The most important aim is to shift from being parents who live together to being separate adults who share the parenting role for your children. This is what co-parenting is. Your previous relationship with your ex has finished. We need a completely new co-parenting relationship, which is now entirely about the well-being of your children. And it's not about your own well-being. Co-parenting is the ideal situation where 2 adults work together to share in the decisions, duty, and care of bringing up their children. Co-parenting is much better for children than split parenting. This is where children literally pass from one world with dad to another with mum, without any real communication between the parents. A classic sign of split parenting is when a child who wants to please both parents says one thing to one parent and something else to the other, as they recognise that the parents don't speak, so they'll never know. A childhood with co-parenting is far healthier for children, increasing their confidence, trust, and experience of healthy relationships. Parents communicating regularly about the children, attending school events together, And keeping each other informed of their children's activities, events, and any issues is so important. These children will hear the we pronoun a lot, such as, we were so pleased you did well in your maths test. Mummy and I are looking at dates and making plans for the summer. Daddy and I don't want you spending so much time on the Xbox. We'd like to talk about GCSE options. We parenting is about so much more than splitting time. In this type of shared parenting, the child is held in the continuing joint parenting relationship, which provides security, learning, and protection for the rest of their childhood and into adult life. And there are two things which will help you achieve this good co-parenting relationship. By moving to talking only about the facts of the situation. We need to leave out our feelings and emotions and discuss these with someone else, as we covered in week 2. This is much more like a relationship at work or with a teacher, where you can discuss the issues at hand and decide what would be helpful to your child. I do most discussions with my ex on WhatsApp, and dates go into our phone diaries, and we invite the other person to the event. You know, you could have termly meetings to discuss dates, times, and school issues. You could take an agenda with you to focus on, so you could make sure you stayed on topic. You know, it may feel impossible in the early days. It certainly did for me, but you will get there. Make sure you have a good friend you can talk to after to process your feelings. The other thing that will help you to achieve good co-parenting is by having a long-term vision for the future. I wanted to be able to sit beside their dad when they got married or at their university graduation. I didn't want them to feel that they needed to seat us separately or worry about if we bumped into each other. So can I encourage you to think ahead? You know, can you picture such a moment? Will you be able to take pride in knowing that you did all you could to establish a relationship with your ex, which has led to everyone's enjoyment of that special day? We're going to go back into groups now, and we're going to discuss how we might take things forward. You know, how do you feel about the impact of divorce on your time with your children? What has helped you in dealing with these emotions? We don't underestimate the difficulty of co-parenting. Our aim on this course is to encourage you to take the first steps to improve your co-parenting relationship. Even if they are really small steps, they can still make a huge difference. Forgiveness is also a key choice for us at this time. And when we can model this choice to our children, when we forgive, it helps us to find freedom, and it gives us the ability to move forward in our lives. Our children can also find this freedom. We need to forgive our ex for any hurt that we feel. And we may need to forgive our ex for any hurt caused to our children. And when we are able to do this, our children will follow our lead. You might also want to say sorry to your children for the impact on them of anything you may have contributed. You might want to tell them that it isn't their fault, nor is there anything they could do to change things. Our choices on our journey are key and are vital for our children as well. but it can be challenging for parents, even at the best of times when they're not dealing with a divorce. So please don't be too hard on yourself. Don't go away from tonight's session, you know, feeling like it's insurmountable. You know, I've had times where I've got on so well with my ex, and we separated and divorced 10 years ago. And then I've had times where things between us are really, really bad. You know, our children are 11 and 12 now, and I've still got many years ahead of co-parenting with him. And there is a co-parenting letter in your workbooks, and I think it's brilliant. I've used it myself. A few years ago, I felt I'd got to a stage where things had deteriorated really quite badly with my ex. And I was desperate for them to improve again for the sake of our children. So I used it as the basis of an honest email to him. You know, I tweaked it, and then I sent it to him, and it made a huge difference to our co-parenting relationship. So it's never too late to start afresh and improve your co-parenting. If you are here tonight and your ex doesn't want to see or help with the children, it can be a desperate situation. Others of you are struggling to see your children on a regular basis, or you may be unable to see them at all right now. We recognise the depth of pain in these situations. Don't get isolated. Keep in touch with us or others. Try to take a long-term view. Keep in touch with the children as much as you can, even if it's only by letter. And if you would like to talk to someone who has been through this and will understand these situations, please talk to your group leader, and we can put you in touch with someone. So to conclude, there is real hope that despite your separation, your children will live a full and healthy life. And the goal is for us to shift from being parents who are married to being separate but successful co-parents. If you can have a good co-parenting relationship with your ex, then your own recovery will accelerate and improve. And then in turn, so will your children's. We know that this transition can be incredibly hard, especially if your ex is being obstructive or antagonistic. However, being able to persist in achieving this goal will bring great rewards now and for your family's future. We have some great book recommendations for co-parenting and guiding your children through divorce. Your leader has a list that they can give you.
Kindly, David has said that he would come and say his experience of being a child in a situation of separating parents. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for having me.
What was your initial experience of any difficulties happening with your parents?
I was about 11 years old, and it's really funny because you don't know what's going on at the time. I don't know how much sort of conscious you are anyway at that kind of age, but there was a really weird feeling in the house, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't explain it, but it was really weird. I'd sort of cry just spontaneously. I'd be very, very happy for a lot of my life and just cry spontaneously. There was just a kind of feeling in the house that just wasn't right. And actually, we went on holiday one summer, and both my parents, having not smoked for kind of my entire life, just both spontaneously took up smoking. And I was like, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. And I just couldn't put my finger on it. So that was the first kind of sign. But the kind of day itself, the day that lives kind of larger in the memory, obviously was when they told us. And yeah, as I said, I didn't really have any kind of conscious idea of it as such. But yeah, it was a day that obviously lives very long in the memory.
What happened?
The first sign was that Dad picked us up from school, which was quite rare, so something is slightly amiss here. So we all went home and we sat in the sitting room, and it was all quite serious, and there was a kind of slight worrying moment where it's like, oh, family discussion, who's died? We sat there, and Dad just explained that he was going to go away for a while, and it was so confusing. I think there was a kind of just, I don't know, there's no right way, I think, to say it, but I think it was just very confusing. There was a kind of lack of information, but then there was, I don't know if there should have been too much information. It was just so confusing. And I think in that moment, the kind of rug underneath our family was just sort of stripped away. And I think that's an analogy that a friend of mine kind of gave me later on that actually really makes sense to me, is that everything was kind of in one moment kind of swept away. And I think it was such a mixture of confusion, of anger, of kind of dislocation. I think it's really difficult to explain. But yeah, probably the most pivotal day, I suppose.
What did you said some of your feelings. What did you what were the biggest feelings that you had around the time?
I don't think it was anger, because I probably didn't understand it enough. There was, I think, just a real unhappiness, I think. Mm. I think in just the kind of fracture of it all is a really deep, kind of just so unsettling, I suppose. Just all the kind of solid things in your life are suddenly just changed. And so there's a kind of fracture. And I think I was just, just really kind of upset in myself, very confused about my parents. What did I really think of them? What about all this stuff they taught me? About all these kind of values and stuff. I think it's just everything gets tugged in that moment, I think. Kind of difficult to put words on it, I suppose.
And what helped you around that time?
Well, Mum's mentioned it. I, being an 11-year-old boy, not very able to talk about anything emotional at all, if I still am. My mum arranged for us to see my godmother, which was amazing. I used to call it my cry time. So I go there with kind of tissues just stuffed in my pockets, and we go to a kind of coffee shop, and she knew my parents really well, and she actually introduced them, so actually she knew both of them, which was so nice to actually not have to explain things. I think that was really important, not have to run her through all the events, because that's really painful, and it's also nothing to do with me in a way. She actually asked me, how are you doing? What are your feelings about that? And, no other 11-year-old, friend is going to ask you this kind of questions, just get on with stuff. But she really kind of honed in and said, well, how has this made you feel? And actually, for the first time, I think particularly in those early years when, everything's falling down around you, just I think to have the focus on you and say, how are you doing, was amazing. And I think as I was the oldest, I've kind of felt like I was trying to kind of hold the fort slightly. I think to have the spotlight on me and say, actually, how are you and yourself? How are you finding all this stuff? Was really important. I think just to hear the words as well. And I'm not a very kind of creative person, so I wouldn't have been able to do it with diaries or drawings or anything like that. But I think to actually put words on what I was feeling was really important, I think, in those early days.
And did the feelings change over a period of time? You said the sort of initial feelings. Then has it changed over the years?
I think there is stuff that is always going to be there. I think there are feelings and there's a kind of, I don't know, a deep feeling about it all that I don't know if it will ever shift really, because it's such a kind of, I don't really know. There are things I think that won't change about my perception of the event.
Like what? Oh,
The facts and I think there is a pain there that will remain. I think it has done for the last 10 years. I think, I don't know, Mum put the word bereavement on it, but probably not that. It's just a really kind of deep loss, I think, for me. Yeah.
And you've got brothers and sisters.
Yes.
What was it like with them? Was it helpful, or was it, you said you were the oldest, so was that difficult?
Yeah, I think it really was difficult. I think completely unintentionally I took on a kind of semi-like parent role, I think, because Dad wasn't there. So I think that was really difficult. And I think that probably put a bit of a wedge between me and my younger siblings, I think.
Right.
I mean, completely unintentionally. And I think this is one of the kind of unintentional side effects that just happen. And I remember we had a kind of family counselling session once, and age kind of 12, I arrived with a list of details that I wanted the children to talk about to the parents. And this counsellor was just like, "Are you 35 or something?" And I just, at that moment, I just completely broke down and wept. He just, within a second, just completely put his finger on everything I was feeling in a way. And I think some families, the kids really like group together and kind of and get through it. And I think for us, actually, we probably split in a way. I think it's got a lot better, and we've talked about it a lot more since we got older. But I think at the time, it was more just like heads down, get on with it yourself. So yeah, I mean, it was really hard. And I think all of us are different, and we dealt with it in very different ways, and it meant we just really didn't understand each other either. I kind of mean, why is my brother so aggressive? Like, probably because he's quite angry. You know, it's just sort of not really understanding each other, I think. Yeah. So there's all those kind of consequences, I think.
What would you say to a parent who's going through it? What would you say to that might help them go through this process?
I don't know. I think Mum slightly put a finger on it when it's just like, you know, some things that, you know, again, some things are the wrong answer both ways. I think, I think for me, finding a way for me to be able to express myself, it wasn't to her, it was to someone neutral, was so important. I think that was the biggest thing for me, was finding a way for me to be able to just put words on, express what I was feeling. Another massive thing, I think that so both my siblings and I agree on, was that we found it really hard when Mum criticised Dad, and actually she probably at the time didn't even think it was criticism. I think a lot of the kind of comments that would be kind of considered jokes if you were married, you know, oh, I don't know, Dad's quite lazy or something. You know, it's quite funny when you're married, but actually when you're divorced, those kind of contexts are just completely different. So, you know, if you know that your mum was already quite angry at your dad and he says, oh, he's actually lazy, you're like, oh gosh, that's quite deep. And, you know, at the end of the day, he's still your father. So I think that was quite difficult. I think, I think sort of parents downloading on children is really difficult as well. And it's very difficult, I suppose, to draw a line as a parent between what's the appropriate amount of information. But I think there is a line between giving someone information and then just downloading on your child as if they were, you know, a friend or I think for me was particularly confusing. I don't know. There's no clear-cut advice because I think every situation is completely different. Every child is completely different. But I think an acknowledgement of what the child's going through. And I know that at the beginning, I think it's so difficult. I think Mum talks about survival mode. I think that's totally right. But I think to acknowledge the difficulty of what children are going through, and I don't think people often understand the kind of pain and the desiccation that children find in all this. I think it's totally right that you're looking after yourselves at the beginning, but you know, children really feel it as well, and really empathise on a huge level with their parents, and that can be quite difficult. You know, 11-year-old taking on, you know, the pain of all this kind of marriage and stuff. So that's not really advice as much as.
No, that's great. Very helpful. I mean, last question for you: how's your relationship? How do you feel you've got a good relationship with both your parents now?
Yeah, I do. I think our relationships have really improved, and I think even my siblings have had quite strained relationships, particularly with my dad, and their relationship has improved so much. I think just through time, and through seeing him a little bit more and kind of understanding it all from his end, because I think a lot of the time, and I think children are aware of it, but you are slightly influenced by the person that you live with and their side of the story. So I think hearing both sides of the story is a very important part of kind of kind of balancing it and working it all out.
Yeah. David, thank you so much. It was really helpful. Thank you. As we finish tonight, I'm just going to say a prayer. So let's bow our heads. Lord Jesus, thank you that you love us all. Please help us to seek to relate to all our other friends and family and children affected by our relationship breakdown. We pray for the children affected, that you might help them in their changed circumstances. And I pray for all the parents that you might guide them and give them wisdom. May your love and peace support us and give us hope. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for coming for this session. I'll see you in the next session.